This week, I got to talk to one of my new favorite authors who will be an auto buy forever for me. Her name is Susan Walter, and today we're going to be talking about Lie by the Pool. But I also recently read Over Her Dead Body and loved that so much. So I am becoming a super fan of Susan Walter. But Lie by the Pool is about Bree. Bree's new home is luxurious and private with a fancy Beverly Hills address. What a shame it's not hers. Widowed, penniless, living in her car, and out of options, she's climbed the fence and crashed into the pool house. All she wants is a good night's sleep, but when Sophie, the absentee owner, finds her, she gets a whole lot more. Sophie invites Bree back for a party. When it winds down, Bree can't resist sneaking upstairs to sleep in a real bed. But the next morning, she wakes to find Sophie's dead body floating in the pool. As the resident vagabond, she's both the only witness and the prime murder suspect. Bree knows she shouldn't run, but her husband's death was mysterious too. If she's going to clear her name, she's going to have to work fast because the killer is out there and she's next. One of my favorite things about both of Susan's books that I've read so far is how insanely cinematic they feel. And they also both have these huge cast of characters where you switch through multiple POVs. Sometimes you're even like really far into the book and all of a sudden you get a new POV. And it's like picking up on all of these little clues to understanding the story through each character's point of view. That combo of really cinematic writing and really complex characters and multiple of them makes the books like so addictive to me, and I just cannot put them down. So I was so excited to talk to her about how her career as a screenwriter has influenced how she writes her books. So let's get into it. Today we're going to talk about your most recent release, which is Lie by the Pool. But I did want to get started kind of getting to know a little bit about you. And so from what I read in your author bio, I was so surprised by how many things you've done. But it sounds like you kind of started off thinking you might want to be a violinist, then kind of switched into maybe newscasting, and then got into TV and film production and did screenwriting, and now you're writing thriller fiction now. But what was like the moment, whether it was like with screenwriting or the books, like what was the moment where you were like, I want to write something, like I have something in me to write?
Well, first I need to say that the musician career and the newscaster career were very short-lived because I was terrible at both of those things. I loved I loved playing the violin, and there's a lot of musical elements in Live by the Pool, which you
Yes.
probably picked up on. The lead character is not a violinist; she's a pianist because I thought that's more fun at
Mhm.
parties. Um,
Yeah.
but I was supposed to be a violinist. I went to Juilliard summer school, and I was already on course to do that, and it just made me really unhappy. Although
Mm.
I will say that practicing violin 6 hours a day was really great training for being a writer, where you are alone in a room, just you and your art. So
Yeah.
it perhaps was formative, but I was not meant to be a musician. And then when I was in college, I got an internship at a news station because I thought I wanted to report the news. And they actually gave me a shot. They gave me a small story and like a 11 o'clock news, and I was like so bad. I was like twitchy, and like viewers were like legit concerned that there was like I
Oh
was having a
no.
medical episode on air or something, and so they're like, "No, you're not an on-air person." So then I'm like, "Ah, what am I gonna do?" So I came out to Hollywood, and that was a long stint. Like I did a lot of things. I did production, and I ran movie sets, and I worked with big movie stars, and it was exciting and exhausting. Um, but I always wanted to be part of the creative conversation, right? There's like the production people who actually do the nuts and bolts of getting the TV show or movie made, and then
Yeah.
there's the story people. And I was a
Hmm.
production person, like really wanting to be a story person. So I quit movie sets and I started writing scripts. And I had some success. It took me 13 years, but I finally got a movie made, which I
Nice.
also directed. And that was starring Sharon Stone and Tony Goldwyn and Ellen Burstyn. And that was like the greatest experience of my life. But it took 13 years. And I'm like, I don't have
Right.
another 13 years. And
Yeah.
the pandemic came, and I had started writing a book.
Hmm.
I didn't think I could finish the book. It's so many words. And I'm like, I'm not an author. But there was really nothing else to do. And we
Right.
were all home. Like, I was washing my groceries and sitting at a computer, right? And so I
Yeah.
finished the book, and that was Good as Dead, which is my first book. And
Hmm.
I was able to get a book agent almost right away. My movie industry contacts helped. It's a
Yeah.
different pool, but they do talk. So like my movie producer
Right.
friends, no book agents, and they graciously made introductions that resulted in me getting an agent and then a 2-book deal. So yeah, it's funny because I wrote Good as Dead. Just I had started it and put it down and then came back to
Yeah.
it, and it worked. But then when I got a
Hmm.
2-book deal, I had 9 months to write a second book. And I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
really know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So that was scary
I
because I was on
bet.
deadline and I didn't
Yeah.
really know what I was doing. But I have to say, I know I'm not allowed to have favorites, but that second
Hmm.
book, Over Her Dead Body, it's like it's zany and it's
Yes.
fun, and I just wrote from my heart, and I just wrote big and bombastic because I didn't really have craft, but it kind of
Yeah.
all came together. And I'll tell you, I learned craft in the process. I reached out to other authors and other editors and
Yeah.
asked for notes. Like, I worked so hard on that book, and probably now I'm working on my 6th book right now.
Hmm.
But of all of them, it's the one I'm most proud of.
Yeah. I loved that one. That was the first one that I read. I can't believe you didn't have craft going into it though. It is like there are so many points of views going on. You like alternate timelines. There's so much going on. I can't imagine that like that's just wild to me that you're like, oh, I was just kind of like going at it with this one because the way it all came together was so cool.
Well, you want to know the funny thing? So I was on deadline, so I was like, okay, I have to make an outline, and
Yeah.
otherwise, because I was nervous, and I was like, I need to have a
Right.
plan. And I wrote the plan, and I was like, good, okay,
Hmm.
I know how it's going to end. And then I started
Yeah.
writing it, and I got maybe 20-25% into it,
Hmm.
and I started to not believe in the plan anymore, but I was
Ooh.
afraid to veer from it because
Oh
I was
yeah.
afraid if I took a different turn, the pieces wouldn't come together at the end. So I stuck with the plan and I forced it through, and I
Yeah.
finished the book. I had like 78,000 words.
Yeah.
And my husband read it, and I was nervous because I knew that it wasn't great. And he
Mhm.
just read it and he shook his head. He's like, "No." And I was like, "What?" And
Oh
it was due in 2 months. And I
no.
realized, like, okay, this isn't the book. I'm going to just
Hmm.
write from my heart, write what I love. That moment where I felt
Yeah.
like I was sticking to a plan that didn't feel fun and true and authentic.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. It's hard when you're like, you start, you write to a plan, you don't know the characters yet, and they kind of take
Yeah.
on a life of their own. And I
Yeah.
thought I was being like so irresponsible by not having a plan and just going where my heart was and having fun
Yes.
and asking questions along the way, like, well, what would she do? And then I
Yeah.
would say things like, well, what's the absolute dumbest, worst, most ridiculous thing she could do? Let's do that. And just
Yeah.
having fun. And I was on deadline with 2 months to go, but I was like, this is how I'm going to get to the end. But it
Oh my
all worked out,
gosh.
and I was very happy with the result. And then I went to BoucherCon, the big thriller writers conference, for the
Mm-hmm.
first time this year, and I met some amazing experienced authors, including like David Baldacci and others who've
Right.
written like 30, 40, 50 books, and
Right.
none of
Yeah.
them outline. I was shocked. I was like, very
Yeah.
few. I would say like 1 in 20 that I talked to.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
always ask, like, do you outline? They're like, nah. How can you outline when you don't know the characters yet?
Yeah. That's what that's what blows my mind because I've done quite a few of these interviews basically with authors, and that's what blows my mind too is like the people that I'm sure would be outliners are like no, and it's like it's actually like a rare few who are like, yep, I outline it all the way and then I go and I like fill everything in. Like I feel like it is a lot more people saying like I kind of have the idea and I sit down and then I just follow what happens as I'm writing. So it's crazy.
That's definitely what I do. And also, I directed a film. And when you're directing a
Mm-hmm.
film, it's a very specific preparation when you're directing a film because you have to take yourself kind of out of it, see the whole movie, and put yourself in the seat of the
Mm-hmm.
audience who's watching it. And you have
Yeah.
to kind of go on the journey with them and ask
Mm-hmm.
yourself with every scene you direct, like, am I delivering for the audience? What does the audience need to know in this moment? And
Yeah.
what is the audience expecting? And how can I surprise them?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I do in writing a book is I try to put
Yeah.
myself in the seat of the reader, and I'll be
Yeah.
writing to where I always think I know where I'm going, and I'll be like, oh
Mm-hmm.
no, this is too predictable, or I need something completely unexpected to happen now. A lot of times I'll
Yeah.
stop and be like, not enough energy, and I'll backtrack a little bit and just say, what's the most explosive, energetic thing I can add? And a lot of
Yeah.
times it's jumping out of the chronology, right? You don't always write
Mm-hmm.
the beginning, middle, end in order. Sometimes you have to pop in and reveal something from
Yeah.
the past, a flashback,
Yes.
or foreshadow something. But it's all very intuitive, and it's all like
Mm-hmm.
the reader comes first. What does the reader need to stay engaged in this story?
Yeah. Yeah, it really what you're saying reminds me of my experience reading your books because there are so many there's I think every single one I haven't read Good as Dead, but I feel like I saw there were multiple there's a large cast in that as well. So there's this large cast of characters and it kind of reminds me of TV shows where like the shows where like you kind of spend an episode with someone and then you switch to someone else's perspective and then like everything means something different because you're like in their perspective. So that was like my reading experience of reading your books was so much like TV shows that did that. And I think that's what kind of made me feel like so much of it is cinematic is it reminds me of the pacing of TV and film and the way that like there's not you kind of have your alpha character like we kind of do have one character that we are like maybe most concerned with in the stories but like everyone else seems just as important and it also feels like all of the characters have their own story arc as well so when you're writing it are you also writing it where like you kind of said like sometimes you have to get right into the middle of it but then like bounce back later do you write it chronologically or do you kind of like start and then you're like all right now we need to jump back 6 months is that like how you basically which way do you end up writing it
I write from page 1 to page 300,
okay
right? So
okay yeah
if I'm going to pop back in time, I don't know it until I get there
wow
necessarily.
mm-hmm
So, again, it's all about keeping the reader engaged. And
mm-hmm
sometimes when you're just plodding along, saying, this is what happened on Monday, and then this is what happened on Tuesday, and this is what happened on
yeah
Wednesday, it's not as gripping as
right
if you bounce around a little bit. And I don't always
yeah
know where I'm going to bounce. So
yeah
it's funny. I love the multiple point of view. I feel like
mm-hmm
it's come more into fashion lately. Like there's a lot more
mm-hmm
books with a lot of points of view. One book that I
yeah
absolutely loved was Liv Constantine, The Last Mrs. Parrish, which was
yes
so interesting in terms of really effectively using points of view, right? You start in one
mm-hmm
character's point of view and
yeah
you're in that point of view for the first, I don't know, 100, 150 pages of the book, and you think
mm-hmm
you know what the quote unquote truth is. And then you
right
flip flop into what you thought was
yes
her competitor or her antagonist's point of view. And
mm-hmm
the whole world opens up. And you
yeah
realize, like, oh, she was not an omniscient narrator. There was a
yeah
whole sector of this universe that she didn't know.
mm-hmm
And
yeah
I learned a lot from that book and just
yeah
how gripping it was. It almost like you overlap in time, right? So they're telling the story Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday from one character's point
mm-hmm
of view. And then this other character comes in and tells the same
yes
story from a very different vantage point with a completely different agenda. That's what was
yes
also exciting. is putting
Yeah.
these two characters at cross purposes. And
Yes.
I learned a lot from that book, and I love
Yeah.
the dueling first person points of view. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and if you do it well, the overlap is just as interesting as introducing new things.
It is. Yeah, I was just talking to Audra McAleer, I think last month, and she brought up a reference to Vantage Point, which was like a movie from like 2010, maybe, from a while ago. But I remember watching it, um, and just being like, this is so cool. Like, you were seeing almost the same series of events, but you traveled through like eight characters, six to eight characters perspectives. So like every time, even though you kind of know like, oh, this is about to happen kind of over there, but you don't know like exactly what happened here. So you're just like constantly kind of like, even as the audience member, you're like, who am I pulling for? Like, I don't even know who I want to come out on top of all of this. And I love that approach to stories. I always think that's so fun.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. So so I keep talking about how it reminds me of TV and movies. Was there anything from like your screenwriting time and your time directing that you feel like affects your writing now?
So definitely the directing, like I
Mm-hmm.
said, when you're directing, you always have to factor in what you're trying what you want the audience to think and feel. So
Mm-hmm.
um, it's very prescriptive, it's very manipulative, it's very deliberate. So that was
Mm-hmm.
definitely helpful experience. I would say for screenwriting, the screenwriting almost worked against me because my
Oh.
first draft of Good as Dead was a little thin.
Mm.
And thank goodness I had a wonderful editor named Tiffany Yates Martin, who's also an author. She writes under the name Phoebe Fox. And she's a
Mm.
wonderful developmental editor. And she was assigned to me. And every page, she was like, why does she think this? What led her to this
Mm.
point? You need to go deeper. And I think
Ah.
I added, this manuscript went from about 70,000 words to over 80,000 words. So I added 10,000
Wow.
words, which was a lot, considering it's like 15% more book. But
Right.
all of it was deepening, like, because as a screenwriter, brevity is king. If you can say
Right.
it in like a few words and leave a lot to the
Mm-hmm.
imagination, there's no room for backstory. You never go into inner monologue, right? What a character is thinking.
Right.
And it took some practice
Mm.
to learn how to do that and know when to do that. So again, that was another learning process. And the
Yeah.
screenwriting, like I had to kind of forget a lot of the rules of screenwriting and
Yeah.
indulge some of that inner monologue that you leave to the actors, frankly. Like when you write a script,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
up for the actors to come up with the backstory. There's no room in a script for a backstory.
Right.
And you may have one in mind, but you don't put it on the page. And you
Mm-hmm.
certainly never tell the actor. It's the actor's
Mm-hmm.
prerogative to come up with their own backstory that they believe that will get them to where they feel they need to be. So yeah,
Nice.
the screenwriting was not so helpful in that regard,
Yeah.
but the directing was really really good.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I had never thought of it that way. Um, so another thing that I love about your books, I'm like a sucker for books that take place in LA or are near Hollywood. So that happens in both that I've read so far. I'm pretty sure the third one as well. But do you think you'll ever write a book that doesn't take place in LA, or is that kind of like a big like inspiration point for you as well?
I'm really glad you asked that because I wrote the three in LA. They're kind of like my triumvirate. I did
Yeah.
definitely the first one is a Hollywood adjacent story. I would say you haven't read it
Mm-hmm.
yet, but
Yeah.
one of the characters, it's 6 points of view, and one of them is a screenwriter. One of them is a big Hollywood producer.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of takes place on the edges of that, where a woman is kind of plopped into a neighborhood where all these fancy Hollywood people live, and she's not like them at
Mm-hmm.
all. And that immediately raises questions like, one of these things is not like the other. And
Yeah.
sure enough, like, she's really not supposed to be there. She's there under very dubious circumstances. So
Mm-hmm.
there's tension in the fact that she doesn't fit into this kind of slick artistic world, and people are scratching their
Yes.
heads like, who is this woman? What's her story really? And she's
Right.
sitting on a story that is explosive, and she doesn't want anyone to know.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's definitely a Hollywood, I would say, adjacent story. And
Mm-hmm.
then the one you read, Over Her Dead Body, I mean, the main
Mm-hmm.
character is a screenwriter. The antagonist is a casting director. So
Yep.
it's definitely deep, deep in that world. And I had so much
Yes.
fun sort of exhuming some of the bodies from
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood, like the corpses that I
Yes.
left behind when I left that world, and be able to sort of snark about some of the
Yes.
injustices really that happen,
Oh,
especially to
totally.
women. Like, I enjoy being able to say that, and I could say it passionately and honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So those two books are definitely have flavors of Hollywood. And then the third one does take place in Beverly Hills, but
Yeah.
no movie people in it. My book
Right.
to film agent said, stop writing about Hollywood, because Hollywood producers don't want to make movies about themselves, and I want to sell your books into movies. So we left the
That's
Hollywood
funny.
world behind, and we took the book number 3, Lie by the Pool, takes place in Beverly Hills,
Mm-hmm.
when a homeless woman takes up residence in a pool house
Mm-hmm.
behind a Hollywood mansion. I mean, sorry, a Beverly Hills mansion, not Hollywood. See, I
Yes.
can't even
Yeah.
stop saying it. It's so
Rodeo Drive.
Rodeo Drive Mansion, exactly.
Yeah.
But then for book 4, I did something completely different.
Ooh,
And
nice.
that comes out this fall 2024. And it's called
Mm-hmm.
Running Cold. And it's about a former Olympian who returns to
Whoa.
her roots in the Canadian Rockies. And I don't know if you
Wow.
ever saw the movie The Fugitive, starring Harrison Ford.
Yes. Yeah.
But
A
that was
while
an
ago, but yeah.
inspiration for it. Yeah, it's an older movie with Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones, in which
Mm-hmm.
Harrison Ford is accused of murdering his wife.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do it, but he still got to go on the run and sort of put the pieces together while he's hiding from the police,
Yeah.
to solve the murder himself so that he can exonerate himself. And so I
Yeah.
love that movie, but I'm like, it should be chicks, and they should be
Yes.
in the mountains in a snowstorm. So a
Nice.
woman
Ooh.
wrongly accused of a crime goes on the run in the Canadian Rockies in a blizzard
Mm-hmm.
with the police and the actual killer on her heels.
Whoa.
So
That sounds
that
amazing.
one's definitely a movie. If there are any movie producers listening, that was definitely a
Yes.
movie. It has a lot of action and a really great leading role. I want Margot Robbie for it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to manifest it and put it
Oh
up
my
there.
gosh. Yeah, let's manifest that for sure. Especially I just saw she did an interview where she was like, I don't like need to do it. Like I think everyone has seen enough of me like this year. So I'll be looking for stuff for like next year. So like maybe the timing will just be perfect for Margot to do that.
Yeah,
The
I
book
gotta
to
go,
TV
like,
or book
knock
to
on her
movie.
door. Hey, I got the movie for you. You
Yes.
want to play an Olympian? Like,
Yes.
go get. She already played
Totally.
Tanya Harding, so she likes
Oh, you're right.
sports.
Oh man, that movie was so good. So good. So I don't know how much you can answer this without giving spoilers, but what was your like initial inspiration for Lie by the Pool? It's one that I tell people, like so much of it changes by the end of it that you're like, wow, I wasn't even like predicting this going into it. So I don't know if you can answer without spoilers, but if you can, what was like your first like moment of inspiration for that?
I'm really glad you asked that, because with every book I write, like, I want to learn something. And look, I have no experience in law enforcement. I'm not an attorney. I do know a lot of attorneys, and I know a federal prosecutor. And I was just really interested in a specific area of criminality. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that's on the fringe of the news. If you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
paying attention to what's happening with some of these big, big lawsuits that are being reported in the news about, like, racketeering. I was like, what is racketeering? What is that?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
kind of racketeering has to do with organized crime, so mafia,
Yeah.
but not the
Mm-hmm.
mafia we've seen, like Sopranos,
Right.
chopping fingers off in a back alley. Like, what are the more sophisticated ways that the mafia operates? So that was an
Yeah.
arena that I wanted to sort of dive into, but I knew nothing about it. Of course, I took on this book and I pre-sold it and I had a deadline and I was like, well, I know nothing about organized crime or how these
Oh
big
my gosh.
like money laundering and how money is moved and all these kind
Right.
of more sophisticated crime syndicates work. But I mean, I
Yeah.
was like, well, I got 9 months. I'm going to figure it out. So I wanted to create a human story.
Yeah.
The lead character finds herself widowed and unhoused and alone.
Mm-hmm.
And how did she get, I mean, the big mystery is like, how did she come to be this way? And she's
Mm-hmm.
talented and she was a concert pianist and she was happily married. And like, how did it all fall apart? And
Mm-hmm.
what did her husband do? Like, you get these ominous foreshadowing that her husband was maybe either not a good person or got caught up with bad people, but you don't really know. And I was like, what kind
Right.
of world can I suck him into where I'll learn something? And it's not something we see in a lot of books. So I guess I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to challenge myself and challenge a reader and
Yeah.
hopefully learned a little bit about a world
Yes.
that is fascinating, but that you may not have read about in very much fiction.
Yeah. I would totally agree with that. And the end of it feels like an action thriller. Like I would say like the last 20% of it feels which I love. Like I love an action thriller or even like a spy thriller. It's not a spy thriller necessarily, but like the ending sequences were so much fun
Oh,
because of
thank you.
what I'm trying not to talk about right now. But
Yeah,
I,
like
I
I like
totally
the
love
big
them.
ending, right? It's really
Yes.
hard. It's also really scary when you don't have an outline and you get to 50,000
Yeah.
words and you're like from 50,000, most of my books are around 80,000 words and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I need rising action now. It needs to get
Yeah.
bigger and bigger and bigger until the explosive climax, which is like at 75,000 words. And so like
Yeah.
I always kind of take a deep breath when I get to 50,000 words, which is kind of the calm
Hmm.
before the storm. And
Yeah.
I know I have to build and it has to be relentless. And I don't want you to
Yes.
put the book down now. Like,
Right.
we're going.
Right.
It's like the horse
Yes.
running for the barn. We're going.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
hopefully I've laid enough groundwork by that point.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, thank you for saying that. It's
Hmm.
my fourth book, Running Cold, is
Hmm.
definitely, I mean, it's an action thriller. And when she
Oof.
goes on the run, hopefully you'll have the same experience. It's like
Yes.
freezing cold and blizzarding, and the power goes
Yeah.
out, and she's all alone. And holy
Yes.
moly, people are chasing her. The good guys are chasing her, and the bad guys are chasing her. And her world is getting
Oh
smaller
my
and smaller and
gosh.
smaller. And she's going deeper and deeper and deeper into the wilderness. And
That sounds
then
amazing.
the very last scene, you're gonna hopefully be holding your breath the entire time.
Oh my gosh. That's
That's
I
my
was
goal.
like
I'll send it to you.
sitting up finishing Lie by the Pool. I was like leaned forward like what is gonna happen right now? I can't afford to be laying down and reading this.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, yeah. Also, I'm in Indiana where it is very much storming and blizzarding right now. So hopefully, hopefully my story does not turn out anything like your fourth book. But
Ooh, yeah.
no, as far as I know, no one's coming after me, so I should be good. So at the end, I've been asking people what they've read recently that they loved, and I know some people don't read while they're writing. So if that's the case, that's fine too. But have you read anything recently that you really loved?
I read constantly. I
Nice.
I'm having a love affair with Lisa Jewell. I've read
Oh,
four of her
yes.
books
Aren't
in
we
the
all?
last. I'd never read her before,
Yeah.
and I don't know why. It's just like her name kept popping
Yeah.
up in my on my Amazon page. Like, if you like this,
Yeah.
try this. And
Yep.
I don't know. I just finally I wound up buying The Family Remains,
Oh my
and I
gosh.
posted
Yes.
it on Twitter. I tweeted a
Hmm.
picture of the book cover, and I was like, so excited this arrived. I'm gonna start it tomorrow. And
Yeah.
guess who tweeted back at me? The Lisa Jewell. She was
Oh
like,
my gosh.
"Thank you for buying my book. Just in case you didn't know, that's the second book in a series. The first one is called The Family Upstairs." And I was like, "Oh my god, Lisa Jewell tweeted me."
That
Um,
is so cool.
so of course I went out. and I wound up getting the audiobook for The Family Upstairs, and I listened to it in like I don't know 24 hours. It's
It's still
gripping.
one of my
It's
all-time favorites. Yeah.
unbelievable, and the readers were
So cool.
so good that I
Yeah.
still have The Family Remains as a book hardcover, but I'm like, no, I want to
Yeah.
listen to the audiobook. So then I bought the audiobook
Yeah.
for The Family Remains, and I listened to those two books
Yes.
back to back in like 5 days.
Wow. Yeah. I would
And
be the
then I
same
had, of
way.
course, had to read 2 more of her books. Her
Yeah.
new one, None of This Is True,
But
about the
so
podcaster.
crazy.
And then I went back and I read the kidnapping one. I can't remember what it's called.
And
The Night She
there.
Disappeared. The Night She Disappeared?
Oh, The Night She Disappeared. Oh my God. Yes.
I mean,
love
what I
that
love
one.
about her writing, some of the thrillers that I read, okay, you can kind of read every other page. They're a little bit like,
Oh yeah.
you
Yep.
know,
I know what you're talking
like they
about.
have great
Yeah.
twists, and I'm totally in awe of some of these twists. I just read one
Right.
of Riley Sager's one,
Mm.
The Only One Left.
Yeah.
Like,
So
talk
many
about twisty.
twists. Yeah.
Like, people
Like 10 at the
pretending
end.
to be other people, and
Yeah.
fake identities and fake deaths, and like so many twists. But
Yes.
they're very plotted. I mean, it's masterfully plotted, but it doesn't, you don't know what somebody had for breakfast, and that, as a kid they love pancakes and whatever.
Right.
Like, they don't
Right.
go into, Riley Sager especially doesn't go into that
Not,
kind of detail.
it's not characterized. Yeah. The characterization isn't as big.
Right. But Lisa Jewell's like the opposite. I feel like her plots are actually fairly simple, but
Yeah.
by the end of her books, you know so much about the characters in such intimate detail that they could do anything and you're going to believe it, because she's made them so real.
I totally agree.
I would even call her literary.
Yes.
In a way that is rare and wonderful. So I'm having a little love affair with her. But I still read lots of other stuff just to know like what plots are out there, because I can't do what other people are doing. Like, I just won't. Like the whole trope about the woman who won't talk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just like, there's already 8 wonderful books about a woman in a room who can't talk. I mean, the Michaelides one, The Silent Patient, was the first one I read.
The Silent Patient. Yep.
Brilliant. But then I read like 6 more. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, we don't need any more.
Yeah. Because it's already been done, and I can't
actually
I can't keep
have
that.
his other one right here, the one that's about to come out. So that's crazy.
I'm dying for that. You got an arc.
I did, because my co-host on my other podcast, he got blurbed in it. So he's like right here as a blurb and sent me a copy, and I was like, oh, you are the best.
I have it on pre-order. I'm dying for that one.
Yeah, I know. I'm about to read it.
Next week, right?
Yeah, I think the 16th. Yeah, so like 4 days from now.
Woo, woo. I know.
Very soon.
I love The Silent Patient.
I did too. It's another one of my top favorites of all time, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were a lot of people that did the Silent Woman after that.
Right? There's so many. I won't name them. You know what they are.
Yeah, right.
Like, another woman who won't talk. Okay.
Yeah, totally.
And then there's like the notes, but did she write the notes, or did somebody else write the notes? Like, all of that. And like I said, there's a lot of ways to do that, and some of them are really brilliant. I just feel like I can't match that brilliance. I have to do something else that somebody else wouldn't dare do, like racketeering.
Exactly.
If you read a book that has racketeering, send it my way, because it's
yes. Yeah, right. That's not like a FBI agent or something, like from that perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm constantly reading, and I'm going to be now following your Instagram, looking for recommendations, because I've been disappointed. I had a couple DNF lately.
I did too. I had a bunch in December, and then actually Lie by the Pool is my first read of 2024. And then I read it was an Amazon first pick deal. Why am I The Real Deal? Yeah, first reads. And it's like it's billed as like literary, not even literary fiction, like chick lit contemporary, but it's the story of like a girl who, well, it's 2 timelines. So when she was 12, she got cast on a docu-series that's like very similar to kind of like Dance Moms, where like she and a group of girls were gonna like be under this woman's like tutelage, and they would get careers from all of it. But then something really ominous that we don't know what it was happened in the 5th season, and it went completely off air. And then in the present timeline, she just got asked to come back and do a reunion show. And
Oh,
so you're like
cool.
bouncing back and forth trying to figure out what happened. So it read like a thriller, or at least like a mystery suspense to me. So I loved it. So I had your book, and Caitlin Devlin wrote The Real Deal. And so I had 2 5-star books that started off 2024. So I was so happy, because I was DNFing a few in December, and I was like, oh no, do I not know how to pick a book?
Did you read Shiver?
Mm-mm.
Shiver, Allie. Ooh, I'm sorry, Allie. I can't remember her last name.
I'm gonna pull it up.
Shiver, one word. It's a similar concept, only they were
Ooh.
Olympic snowboarders on the team, and
Ooh.
they have
Allie
a
Reynolds.
reunion up a snowy mountain. Um,
Ooh.
and same kind of thing. Like,
Wow.
you don't know what happened those 10 years ago.
Yes.
And that if you really like The Real Deal, and
Yeah,
you like that sort of dual timeline thing,
I do.
I recommend Shiver. And also, if you like
This
snow,
looks amazing.
yeah, in
Yeah, that
France too.
too.
I think it's like Chamonix in France or something.
Nice. Yeah, I
What's
think
her
it
name?
says that.
Allie. We have to say her name out
French
loud.
Outfits, Allie Reynolds. Shiver by Allie Reynolds.
Yep.
And the cover says, they didn't know what I did, and I intend to keep it that way. So that
Yeah.
sounds very fun. Ooh.
That was an
definitely
inspiration.
reading that one.
When you get my arc for Running Cold, you'll be like, oh,
Yes.
she was inspired by Shiver. I see the
Oh,
sort
that
of
is so cool.
the homage.
Yeah. Yeah, I have so many that I want to read right now. I'm like, could I just like not work? That would be nice if I didn't have to work anymore. But we'll get there. So where can people follow you to keep up with everything? All these other books that'll be coming out as well.
I would say the best place is at Susan Walter Author on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I try to post both what I'm reading and
Yeah.
I'm not a like bookstagrammer. I don't do reviews. It's kind of awkward for authors to do reviews because you
Right.
can't say anything less than 5 stars.
Yeah.
I mean, you really can't. You have to support your fellow authors, and not all books resonate with all people. But it's a 5-star read for someone, and to give less than 5 stars, I feel like it's just.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I get it. Like, I don't post about books I don't like. I'm just like, I just want to post about the books that I like, even as a bookstagrammer. Yeah.
So if you see big blank spaces where there's like, wow, she hasn't been reading, it's like, no, just not posting about them.
That's the same thing that happens to me. Yeah.
And also totally. I have a website, susanwalterwriter.com. And that one's just like for general information if you want the synopses of my books. I do have a newsletter that you can sign up for on susanwalterwriter.com. But Instagram's a great place, and I love reading what people are reading. You can tell when someone's really passionate about a book, and it lights me up to see all you guys posting about the books you love. Because I think readers are really special people. Like, we know so much more than other people because we read.
Right. You experience so much more just through like other perspectives and stuff. That's like one of my favorite parts about it. And I'm not adventurous as a person, but I can be adventurous through what I read.
But a good writer can take you there.
Yes.
And you can have empathy for people that you otherwise wouldn't have. And I just think, man, since I got back into reading, my life has opened up in so ways. My heart has opened up in new ways.
Yeah.
So, and I don't just read thrillers. I like to read biographies. I'm reading Britney Spears' book right now.
I have not read it yet. It's like on my radar. Excited. That's one where I think I could listen to the audiobook while I walk my dogs. I feel like I could.
It's so
oh my gosh, that is beautiful.
It was expensive. Yeah. It was a splurge. I think it was like $22 or something.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I got to support the Britters because she took me through some dark times for me.
Totally. That's I love that. Well, I will put all the links that we just talked about in the show notes so people can find that. But otherwise, thank you so much for chatting with me about books.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's so nice to meet you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Between the Lines, and if you did, the biggest thing you can do to support the podcast is to go rate and review it on whatever platform you listen on. You can also follow me on Instagram at thegirlwiththebook on the couch. And if you still need more thrillers in your life, check out Killing the Tea, my other podcast where I talk to my friend Gare about literally everything we read.